hello, and welcome to another episode of the Full Quota podcast. My name is Mpho and I've got Tim Delace here. This is your weekly South African cricket podcast that talks all things South African cricket, even up until Division 2 cricket, women's domestic cricket. Lots are happening as technically by this time the cricket season should be over, but it's not, so there's still a lot to discuss, and that's really cool because for cricket to be a viable product, kind of needs to go into an all year round model with like a off season of about a month or two. I know players and coaches are going to be angry at me, but yeah, try to get as much revenue as possible. But we're going to talk about all of that right now because it was a great game in Polokwane yesterday with a beautiful crowd, and we saw some amazing things happening. And then obviously we're going to be talking CSA T20. But before we do anything else, remember, please follow us on Full Quota Pod on X, and subscribe to the One More Sports Radio channel. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts under Full Quota Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, and follow us there as well. I actually need to change the bottom line to add Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well, just to make sure that everybody can follow us. But we do appreciate your support. We do appreciate your comments. We'd love more of them to come through. We love your interaction on Twitter or X, so please do bring that through. It's improving as we go along because someone has relinquished the admin responsibilities to another person on this podcast team, and that is Tim. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, but I'm doing good. No, it's all about delegation, mate. This is a team effort. We're all gonna pull our weight. Yeah,
Yes, and
all good, all good, despite the football yesterday. Focusing on the positives.
oh yes. By the way, Tim
Yes,
supports Liverpool. I support Arsenal. So there's a 1 point gap between. Oh, there's a 0 point gap between us now.
zero,
But someone's on top.
zero.
Yeah, with 7 games to go. So I'm freaking out because I feel as though Manchester United might do you a favor at Old Trafford in that at the end of that in the end of the season. So, but yeah, we're not talking about soccer. Let's talk about what happened this week, even though the game was part of what happened this week. Lots of rain in South Africa. That's what happened this week, but we managed to get a lot of cricket. Um, and one of the key things that happened this week was something that bothers me a lot, but there's nothing I think we can, nothing Tim and I can do about it, but outside of talking about it. The South African women's team, the Proteas women, lost their first ever T20 series to Sri Lanka, 2-1. They played the deciding game in East London, and what happened was South Africa put up 155, which I thought at this level of women's cricket, that's a defendable score. Little did we know, Chamari Atapatu, who hadn't scored a 50 in 11 matches, decided to put on a show. And then she got out, and then we thought, ooh, there's a chance. Then Samara Rikrama managed to get Sri Lanka over the line. Now, to put this into context, Sri Lanka also beat England, the mighty England, in a T20 series. So, and that was their first ever. And this was in the last, I think, 12 months, right? So you've got a Sri Lanka team that's going like this, going up. But sadly, you've got a South African team that's going like this. Case in point, the batting. There are a couple of the senior players who are not pulling their weight. One, Sune Luce. I'm going to name her because she's a former captain. She's been in the side for many times, but she has not scored, I think, a 50 in the last 11 or last 20 games. She hasn't gotten over double digits in the last 5. She hasn't gone over 20 in the last 11. There's a lot of stats there in Firdousa's ESPN Quick Info article that you can talk about. The other batters in the side, Tasman Brits is in a bad spot of form. She's a little bit more closer in the form books than Sune, but still not the greatest of form. Chloe Tryon, we've now subsequently found out she's injured. She didn't come and pull her weight here. This team is off and on. It's night and day. And the only thing that's keeping this batting lineup together is the captain, Laura Wolfart, whose average now as Proteas captain is now hitting the 80s. It's unbelievably ridiculous that this is happening, but it is. And the question, Tim, we always ask, We're the next people. And I know that Nadine de Klerk did say in her interview that she's trying out new roles. They're trying to test out their depth. This doesn't look like testing out depth. There's nobody here who's new where you can say, I know, give them a chance. Maybe if you want to talk about Ayanda Stubi, maybe you want to talk about Karabo Miso, but Karabo's there for glove board. She's not there to score runs. Yes, the runs will be helpful, and I think she's a better batter than Sanala Jafta. But we have a serious, serious issue here, and we can't paper over the cracks saying that we are testing out depth or trying new things. Yes, maybe you can try Nadine as a finisher. That we can get, that we understand. But something fundamentally is wrong on both sides, even the bowling. The bowling after Shibnim Ishmael is gone has effectively gone downhill. And I don't know if it's time for us to intervene or so for someone at CSA to intervene, Enoch Ngwe, to, I know they've extended Hilton's contract, and that's something that I disagree with. I'm a massive fan of him. I think he needs to take a level, go up a level up, and become the new director of women's cricket, and then let someone else come in and run the team, probably Denisha, the way that they see fit, or get someone else in, or even get an international consultant. Something needs to change to help us move the women's game forward. And if you look at the women's game, the fixtures in domestic cricket, it's the same old people. We have the same issues. If you look at that Commonwealth game, not All Africa Games team, they're just not at that international level yet. And it's a worry, Tim. It's a real worry to me. And that's my first rant for today. Sorry, Tim. I'm just so angry.
No, you hit the nail on the head. The problems that we have been talking about since the World Cup final. We've been talking about this on and off since the World Cup final. That a change was needed, a new direction was needed, a new blood of players. That was the time to bring in a new blood of players because the Proteas team were on a high. They had achieved something quite remarkable, and they got very close to going up to getting that trophy. That was the time to then bring in people like Marks, people like Meso. That was the time to do it. Now it's after the horse is bolted. You're now doing it with a struggling team, and that is much, much harder to work out whether that person that you're bringing in is actually up to standard when the team as a whole is struggling no end. It's much easier to do when you are a team who are performing well, winning games, playing good cricket. At the moment, this team is not doing that. That being said, that does not mean there should not be changes. I really can't see this being the status quo.
Yeah.
If we are talking about this in 6 months' time, you know, after the winter, there's a huge problem. We have to be, in 6 months' time, we've got to be discussing about, wow, fantastic. They've really changed things, they brought new people in. We don't want to be talking about the same topics we have been talking about since the World Cup.
Yeah, no, and to a certain extent, for me, that's what this one day series that's coming up is going to be really important. You want to see the gap between the two teams widen because there is better quality in the South African side. They can't play spin. That's something they need to figure out. But yeah, and we've had this conversation for the last 6-7 years about the ability to play spin. Some years they get it, some years they don't. This feels like a year where they just don't know how to play it. And to a certain extent, that's what you kind of need. You kind of need to bring in new players and give them a fresh chance, right? And we've seen Marks, we've seen Meso, but you need more players from that emerging side. Give them a chance, see. But even then, at that level, we've seen players not do it. And to a certain extent, I think maybe we may have to go back to basics and say, since we're being professional and this league is now being professionalized, the Protea players need to play a certain number of games for their franchises. Laura needs to come up to Pretoria and play for the Titans. Chloe needs to play for the Lions. Everybody needs to go to their franchise, strengthen it, make it strength versus strength, and then let's see out of the rest who steps up and puts their hand up. Right. I've got my eyes on Simone Lawrence of Titans. I think she's really awesome. I think she's someone who needs to come in and maybe even consider taking away the age limit and bring in Sunette Fallion-Marais. She's really good. She used to play for the Proteas. She's doing really good stuff um for the Lions in the CSA domestic league. So give her a chance, right? So yeah, really disappointing, but they start their T20 the one day internationals tomorrow in East London, and then they'll play a few more throughout the week. So next week Monday will probably be left with a decider to discuss and to talk about. But it's actually quite important that our women actually do well in this series. You can't go down to another series loss. That probably would prompt some changes, Tim. But you don't want changes to be prompted by something like this.
Quite right. Yeah, absolutely. You want to get ahead of the ball.
Yeah. And then something else we need to talk about. Lazard Williams came through. I don't know late last night or this morning. Has been asked to join the Delhi Capitals in the IPL, which is really awesome. Coming off a stellar SA20. The only question that begs is that he's in not a great run of form right now. The Titans aren't doing well. He isn't stepping up in the CSA T20 as an elite lead bowler of the guys who are left here. And many people are asking why the Capitals didn't go for Otniel Bartman, who was SA20 bowler of the year. He took 18 wickets, low economy rate, has many skills, a little bit quicker than Lazard Williams. They probably have a similar skill set, just one's probably quicker than the other. Tim, really happy for Lazard. I think he's a guy, brings in a lot of energy, brings in fight into your team. Just not in a great patch of form right now, but well done to him on getting that contract, because for the Jersey Super Kings, he was really important.
Yeah, look, team dynamics are important with the IPL side. So if you look on a piece of paper, you're going to pick Otmar Bartman, but I'm not entirely sure what the Capitals have in terms of that type of bowler. But I'm a big fan of Lazard. When we spoke to him last year, he wanted to get more exposure of playing overseas. He was in that context talking about county cricket. This is a step up. This is a really big opportunity for him to not just be a fill-in, not just be a guy that's going to sit on the sidelines and watch for six months. This is a really good opportunity for him, and I just hope he takes it. It's a great opportunity for him. I think he could do really well. But IPL is a different beast. We all know that. It's a different kettle of fish. But I just hope he does well.
Yeah, no, hope so too. Largely because the other South African bowlers aren't doing that great. Arnold Nokia not having the best starts to the IPL. Gwena's come back a little bit better, but it's not lining up the world. The bowler, surprisingly, who is doing really well is Nandre Berger, which kind of begs the question. He wasn't necessarily in our starting 11, but now Coach Rob has a question around the bowling as to how he can get these guys back into form by the time they get to America.
Yeah, it's it really does separate world class to international cricket. There really is a separation when it comes to this tournament. I'm not too worried about the fact that somebody like Nokia is not quite at his best. He's had a lot of injury problems over the last short little while. He's just coming back from that. There's a reason why he didn't pick up that central contract from Cricket South Africa. He wanted to focus on these formats. That's clear to see. I'm not worried for him. Wider picture, it is slightly concerning, perhaps, but we're still very early on in the competition. I think they will all come good in the end.
Hmm.
They are all quality bowlers.
Yeah, and one or two more things to note: Western Province women have emerged as the women's T20 competition champions in the new professional women's cricket league that we have in South Africa. They play one days and T20s. One days on Saturday, T20s on Sunday. So you have two leagues, but obviously one fixture between the teams. So the season's not over, but they've been crowned champions of the T20 league. They've got an unassailable lead. I think it's about over, it's like 12 points or 8 points. And with the Lions having one game left, the maximum points you can get is 5. The Lions on 24, so they can't get there. But in the One Day Cup, it's different. The Dolphins, Hollywood Bets Dolphins ladies, are leading that. They have a 5 point lead against the Lions, whom they play in a final fixture at the end of this week on Saturday and Sunday. But obviously, Saturday is going to be the key one because that could determine who wins the One Day Cup. What the Lions need to do is they need to beat the Dolphins by with a bonus point. So they need to win that game with a bonus point. They are in Durban, so hopefully there's not going to be any rain around because right now in South Africa it's been very rainy. It's overcast. It's gloomy. It's not the type of day cricketers want to play. But hopefully by the time Saturday rolls around, we'll get some sun and we'll get some game through to kind of give some sort of urgency to the women's domestic league. Finally, it's coming to an end. There are about 3 games left. Currently, what's happening right now, I beg your pardon, Division 2 is having their culmination of the season in Oudtshoorn. They're playing a lot of games. All of this is available on CSA's YouTube channel for you to have a look at.
I
And then,
just, I just want to point out very quickly, the team's social media platforms have been very impressive. So it hasn't always been easy to keep up to date with both competitions,
yeah,
but if you watch the team's social media platforms, it actually has been. They've been very good
yes,
from that point of
yeah.
view.
Yeah, no, and that must be praised. And it's been a massive highlight of this season for that to happen. And then last one, Bear Swanepoel gets his county contract. He'll be joining Kent at the end of our season to help them in their season. So really awesome. He'll be joining Ben Compton, Tawanda Muyeye, and the like to kind of bolster their season as they hope to try and win the championship.
And if you've been watching our journey from the podcast right from the beginning, you would have seen us speak to Dan Weston. He is the head of recruitment.
At Kent.
He knows his stuff. So he's part of the people they get. It's a huge opportunity for Bears. I think he's going to have a wonderful time.
I think he's
He's
going
going
to
to
do so
enjoy
well.
bowling. He's going to enjoy bowling on this wickets. I tell you, he's going to
Oh,
enjoy bowling on this wickets. And then on
yes.
the smaller grounds, he's going to hit the ball very far. Yeah, I think it's going to be really good.
Okay. Speaking about hitting the ball very far this week, we had actually I'm missing the one. Yeah. So this week we had the culmination of the CSA Division 2 T20 challenge. It ended in a final in Limpopo, in Polokwane. It was the Limpopo Impalas taking on the Northern Cape Heat. And we have a winner, someone who you wouldn't have thought would have taken silverware, but they did. We interviewed their coach earlier this year. And so congratulations to the Limpopo Impalas on an incredible season. Immense CSA T20 challenge. They went from strength to strength. The One Day Cup, they won a few games. 4-day series, they were challenging at the top. And finally, in the T20 challenge, they took everything home. This week, let's get through how it happened. So they played the Eastern Cape Lanyati this week in their semi-final on Wednesday. They put up 159 for 8, and they managed to restrict the Lanyati to 142 for 6. And winning that game by 17 runs. Ruan Haasbroek, who's captain of that side, 55 off 29 balls. Liam Peters, 37 of 33. And Don Khatebe, 1 for 21. You've been seeing Don's name every week. He's doing a really great job there in Limpopo. Then the second semi-final was a bit of a revenge. Remember, the Knights won promotion into the Division 1 at the expense of the Heat. And so the Heat had to come back and try and beat them in the semi-final, and they did. As Heat scored 186 for 5, and the Knights could not get to it because they got restricted to 182 for 9 by 4 runs. Jonathan Van Dier scored 56 of 34. Christopher Kleinhans, 46 of 26. Tsepontuli took 2 for 20. But Bashir Walters, with that final over, the Knights needed 14 in that over, and he managed to restrict them to 10 with the final ball knocking out middle stump. It was probably one of the best death bowling I've ever seen. It was Bashir Walters rolling back the years, Tim. He was just rolling back the years in that final over.
Yeah, absolutely. So that he's a real stalwart of South African cricket, doesn't he? So that was that game, but it was the final really. The final was something else.
Yes. So let me get to the final result, then we'll talk about it. The Impalas at home beating the Heat by 6 wickets. The Heat were restricted to 132 for 9. And Limpopo managed to get 136 for 4. Sizwe Masondo, 51 not out of 57. He effectively decided to drag his team home. Held on for as long as he could for that 51. Really awesome 50 in a final. Ron Hosbrook, 35 of 33. Ernest Kim, a valiant 42 of 31. The Heat, Tim. Oh, Daniel van der Merwe got 4 for 18, but the Heat were 62 without loss. Then they lost Ernest Kim. Then they lost Jonathan Van Dier, and they proceeded to lose. What was it? It was 5 wickets for 27 runs, and then they proceeded to lose the next 5 for another 42. And it was that type of collapse on the both sides that was spurred on by Daniel van der Merwe, because he started the wicket taking to remove Kim and Van Dier, and then he came back at the end to remove the tail. What did you make of that final? The one thing, CSA, amazing. Small grounds, crowds look big, makes everything amplified. That Polokwane cricket ground, beautiful. The crowd was there. There was a vibe. There was entertainment. It's what you wanted, and it was really, really great to see that Division 2 had fans and had supporters and had people actually interested in the fact that it was Limpopo's first ever CSA trophy. Tim?
I think, again, I've got to give a huge credit to Limpopo social media. They have been, throughout the season, throughout the competitions, they have been very, very prominent. They have been putting stuff mostly on Instagram. So if you're shouting at me saying I didn't see anything on X, I understand. Neither did I. It's the Instagram. That's where people go these days. That's where people go for these interactions.
That's where the young people go to.
It's where the young people go. That's what I was looking for. I'm no longer young, but it was, and it really was. The build-up of that was important because they showed what was happening at the stadium with the flags and doing the preparations. So you built up a feeling of the final. There was a building up towards that final. The final itself, it was a really, really good game. Because Heat batted first, it was very important Limpopo managed that situation, in that if they had had to chase 150 plus, they would not have got there. It wouldn't have mattered what sort of start they happened. In a final, Northern Cape Heat know how to, in a winnable position, they know how to win games. They knew at that halfway mark they were not there. It was still winnable, but they were not.
Yeah.
They were not in charge. It was very much a 50-50 game. In terms of the chase was very jittery. It was a It was a team who haven't won it before. It was a team who hadn't been in that situation before. So you understood the jitteries. You understood the really poor run out they lost in the second wicket. It was a really poor run out.
Yeah.
But the importance of Masondo and Harsbrook
Yes.
to just calm down things, both
And it.
very, very experienced individuals, was
Mm,
absolutely crucial. Just the final for me. I'm really, really glad that Gordon promoted Van der Merwe in the chase. I think
mm,
if they had not promoted him, I think it would have been down to the last over. And anything can happen in the last over, even if it's
yeah.
2 or 3.
He was on
Get that
18
up.
for 8 to close it
18.
off, and you kind of needed someone with boundary with the ability to hit boundaries to kind of get you over the line, because you kind of got the game plan from Hasbrook and Masondo. It was, let's try to take it as deep as possible. We'll find boundaries later on. They're gonna tire. They're gonna give up. And kudos to Northern Cape Heat. They didn't, and like 51 or 57 kind of tells you that they were. They were trying to get over the hump, but it was not going to be easy. And they
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
went into their shell. And, the only rash shot they ever took was that final one. But even before then, in that final over, well, the 18th over, when they're trying to get these 6 runs, and there's a call, yes, no, yes, no. Luckily, Daniel gets back, and then you're like, okay, so what's happening? Then they're on the 2, and then the question was, does Masondo get to his 50 or not? What's going to happen? And then Caesar was like, okay, fine, I'm just going to lay into this next one, and it ends that way. But it was too the self same Bashir Walters we're talking about. It just created so much drama and intrigue, and those 3 semifinals, the semifinals, the 2 semifinals, and the final, all dramatic. Even though Border didn't necessarily, the Linyati was a little bit of an easier win. There were some very tight moments there. Some moments that had us at the edge of our seats, because there was a point where it looked like the Linyati were going to do it, and then it started losing wickets quickly, and then it just started falling away. So really, really great exhibition of the Division Two, and they really did well. And
Just,
congratulations to
just,
Limpopo. Yes,
just
Tim.
one thing. Because I'm a Worcestershire fan, as some of you know, again, similarities between the two are there in terms of small teams. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have a lot of money. Um, they were in discussion yesterday about the importance of generating advertising by doing well in white ball cricket. That's where they get their advertising. The point I'm making here is it is very important that a team like Limpopo win these sorts of tournaments. I just hope that the Limpopo region, that there are companies and businesses within that region
Mm,
that are now going to go knocking on that door and saying, "We want to be involved in this. You've gone and you
yes.
won the tournament. You've done your side of things. Now we are going to sponsor you for next season." I really hope that is going to happen, because the only way we see that continue, the only way we see those sorts of stories continue, is if
As
they
if there's
have
funding.
money,
Yeah.
funding. That is the only way.
Mm.
Otherwise, that'll be a once-off, and we don't want that.
Yeah. And also, maybe for the final, Super Sport, broadcast that rather than the other Division 1 games, which they weren't great on Sunday. But let's go to Division 1 and talk about that. So, the Division 1 results this week, we had a whole lot of games. They only had one game rained out, and that was on Sunday. Oh, there were actually 2 games that were rained out. I beg your pardon, because I was at the one. First one
There
was
was,
the
yeah,
Rocks against
I,
the Tuskers against the Dragons in Potch on Wednesday night. That got rained out, and then this one, the Western Province and the Rocks on Sunday, got rained out. But the Lions played Western Province Newlands on Wednesday night. They went hammer and tongs at Western Province. Ryan Rickleton 73 or 46, Reza Hendricks 50 or 90 or 49. I beg your pardon. Ngabayomzi Peter, who is the find of the season for the Lions. He took 4 for 7. Lutus Sipamna 3 for 14. Remember him. Tim, Western Province in their response being bowled out for 81 for the largest victory margin in the history of T20 challenges in whatever form you want to call it in South Africa. Tim, what do you make of that?
Yeah, like the better team won. There's absolutely no other way of saying
But
it. The better team
Tim, what's
won.
going on at Western Province? What's going on with your team?
Was the Prophets are not a T20 side? I said it at the start of the tournament, as well as they are now having to play the second half of the tournament without David Bellingham, and
Mm.
and that is having a influence on the situation. What should have happened, and I we saw it last season. Was it last season or the season before? The
Mm-hmm.
Knights, they got he didn't play, but they got an English white ball player to go into their squad just for the T20 tournament. He didn't play
Mm.
for what's the word? Uh, red tape rules. I won't go
Okay.
into it, but that's what should have happened with Province. You can't Province. I know what Province are going to say. They're going to say they don't have money. You have money to pay somebody to come for a month to play T20 cricket and
Mm.
play in that. That's what they needed to do, in my opinion. I'm not gonna give names or anything, but that's what they needed to do. If they really wanted to win this tournament, they needed to get a proper T20 specialist batter in that squad, and they didn't do it. So I'm not surprised. Uh, I'm not overly worried. It's not a major concern
Yeah.
because it's still been a very good season. It's just that it's unfortunate that it's tapering off in
Yeah.
this tournament.
Okay. Let's move on to the next game. On Friday, we saw the Tuskers take on the Rocks. Remember last week I said the Tuskers need to win both their games, or two of three of the games this week to kind of help them with relegation. They then went on to play their fellow basement dwellers, the Rocks in Paul. They only managed to get 94 runs, and the Rocks managed to get there with 4 wickets remaining. Imran Manak 3 for 17. He was sensational on Friday night. Sean van Berg 2 for 15, and Sia Mahima 1 for 22. Just spinning out the Tuskers, which was really disappointing because if they ever want to make a case for them standing up, they needed to win a game like this, and they go on and yeah, let it go. Then on Friday night, the other game on Friday night, it was yes, the Titans taking on the Warriors in Gqeberha. The Titans finally beating the Warriors, and the Warriors doing their first game. In nine, remember they're unbeaten. They're no longer unbeaten. Sponela Makanya scoring 60 or 48. Rivaldo Munsami 34 or 14. Aaron Pangiso 28 of 18, being promoted to I think number 8 in the side, and Corbin Bosch 3 for 22. What is intriguing about this, obviously, is that the Titans have struggled, but this was the start of them trying to get back into it. And it was a really good win for the Titans. Obviously, the Warriors themselves just losing one on the way, but they're still well ahead at the top. Then on Friday night, in a 9 over game, the Dolphins losing to the Lions at the Wanderers by 7 wickets. Bryce Parsons effectively batted for the first 13 balls and scored 36 runs in that game. And then after that, it just was downhill from there for the Dolphins. Grant Williamson 27 off 16. Ryan Rickleton then came back and said, "Oh, this is very small things." He scored 53 not out of 23 balls, and Cody Yusuf 3 for 15. He bowled really well for the Lions, who were trying to rein back that onslaught from Bryce Parsons. It must be said that Parsons is injured. He did injure his knee at the Wanderers on Friday night, and we hope that he gets a speedy recovery, but it might be out for the season with the way that injury looked on Friday night. And then on Sunday, the Titans then lost to the Tuskers, which was it never ends for this Titans seed anyway. Luanda Petro scored his maiden half century, 58 of 43. Sponela Makanya, another 28 of 14. Kirtland Manikam, 3 for 28 for the Tuskers. And Cameron Dalport finally earning his paycheck, 83 not out of 49 to help the Tuskers win by 6 wickets. And then the Dolphins beating the Dragons in Potchefstroom. Marcus Ackerman 72 or 46. They were 30. They were, what is it? 37 for 7 or something weird like that.
That is
Um,
correct. Yes. Yeah.
the Dolphins
Yeah. Yes, they were. 30,
and
35,
four.
I think. 35
Yeah,
for
35 for
7.
7. And Marcus Ackerman and Ethan Bosch, who Bosch has now only started playing the T20 challenge this week with the game against the Lions on Friday. Now he's back in the squad. He's got 66 of 38. Marcus Ackerman, 72, not out of 46. And then Ogu Hletele helped restrict the Dragons to 154 with his 3 for 28. Some intriguing cricket, Tim. What were a couple of your highlights? I know mine was Bryce Parsons 36, and then after that, Ryan Rickleton said, "No, we don't do it like this here. We go big, young man." I was really impressed with Bryce Parsons. Really had a breakthrough season, but that 36 was deadly. And to a certain extent, to get them to 98, I didn't think that Dolphins batting lineup was ever going to get 98 runs in that game, but they did because of what they had. And you kind of see then it gave them the momentum in that next game. Well, now they had a batting collapse, but then Marcus Ackerman and Ethan Bosch helping them out. And so really, really, those were some of my highlights. But what were yours?
Proof that Cameron Darport watches the podcast.
Yep.
After criticizing him throughout the tournament, saying they need to move on from Cameron, he went berserk and just brought out the old Cameron that we saw 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, it was, and that, but also what it also told me is if they'd won that game, which we said last week was a must winner, if they'd beaten the
Against the
Rocks,
Rocks, yeah.
they would have been in a. It still would have been difficult, but at least
They would
mathematically,
have been
they would
chasing.
have been. You would have been chasing the people that they need to be chasing.
Yeah. Because they need to finish in fifth in order to stay
Yeah,
up because you need
yeah,
3 points, right? And fifth gets you 3 points. And so, yeah, fifth gets you 3 points. And so you kind of need to get there and above. And they needed to win. But now, obviously, now it's just must win. Now they have to win all their games. They need to go to the
everything.
Warriors next. They go to the Warriors
Yeah,
next. They need to win all their games. But it was
yeah,
funny because they beat the Titans. And then so when you look at the log, Tim, from a relegation perspective, right? Um, you have the Tuskers and the Rocks on the same number of points. Now it's a net run rate issue, and that's one of the things that that's one of the things where you kind of know that the Tuskers are going to lose. So now, what is happening now is the Rocks, because of they finished second last in the One Day Cup and the 4 Day Series, they've got 2 relegation points. The Tuskers need to win. They need to come in fifth in order for them to have minimum 3 points. And then you then start weighing out. I don't know how CSA is going to do the tiebreaker, but then you ask CSA to do a tiebreaker. And so the question then I look at is, okay, fine. Can they get to at least the Northwest Dragons or the Momentum Multiply Titans? They've beaten the Titans before. They can do that again. But now the Tuskers need to go on a run in order to stay up. Everyone else needs to obviously win games and get themselves through. But if the Tuskers are wanting to avoid this, they need to do that. So yeah, I know Tim has gone away, but and he'll be back soon. But let's talk about the top of the table. The Warriors are top of the log with 35 points after 9 games. The Lions in second position, so that second home semi-final might just go to Johannesburg. But there's a lot of games to go. There's 4 more games to go for the Lions, the Dolphins, and Province. The Dolphins and Province are now equal on points at 23, so that's going to be quite interesting to see how that happens. And then obviously they've got a 6-point gap between them and the Titans. So the Titans have a lot of work to do. They do have a game in hand. That game in hand, if they do win it by a bonus point, they'll go down to 22 points. So you'll have that 3-way fight for the last spot in the last few spots in the semifinals. So That's also going to be quite interesting in terms of going into the following week. In the following week, the fixtures of the CSA T20 challenge, the Dolphins take on the Titans on Wednesday, which essentially is like a 10 pointer. Titans win, they get closer to the Dolphins in the Western Province, and the Dolphins don't move away. But if the Dolphins win, they go to 27 points, and the Titans stay at 17. So it's a really important game for the Titans to try and close that gap as much as they can. But if you look at the next game, the Tuskers and the Warriors on Friday, that's also quite important for the Tuskers. They're in must-win territory. If you win a game like this, it stands you in good stead, trying to help save your season and help yourself stay up for the Tuskers. The Titans then take on the Rocks at Centurion, another winnable game for the Titans, for them to stay in that hunt for that semi-final. Also for the Rocks to push the Tuskers away further into relegation, essentially. Then on Friday in Poch, you've got the Dragons against Western Province. And that's also an intriguing game. The Dragons are also trying to get themselves back in, maybe in the mix. I think the semi-final is a little bit too far away for them, but Western Province really need to try and cement a semi-final spot, especially with the way in which their cricket is going, is trending downwards. The Dolphins then take on the Western Province in Newlands on Sunday. We've got a full slate on Sunday. All 8 teams will be playing. That's also a key game. Another separator, right? The Titans are going to obviously probably hope that they wouldn't want this to end in a no result, but they actually want to win. One of these teams needs to lose for them to kind of know who the person is that they're trying to chase. So it's actually quite important in there. Then the Lions take on the Dragons at the Wanderers on Sunday. Lions looking to cement that semi-final spot with this win. I think if they win this 134 points, it might all but secure a home semi-final. And then finally, you've got the Titans and the Tuskers playing at Centurion. The Tuskers won that game on Sunday. Can they do it again to give themselves another chance at staying up and getting as close as possible to that fifth position? And then finally, the Rocks taking on the Warriors in a game where if the Tuskers need the Warriors to win, the Rocks need to try and find a way to if they beat the Warriors as well, it might just be curtains for the Tuskers. So there's a lot of permutations still going around in terms of the fixtures, and it's going to be quite an important week for the Rocks, the Tuskers, and the Titans. Tim, I was busy just going through the fixtures, right? Trying to get through who has a big week. The first game on Wednesday is effectively a 10-pointer. The Titans are going to be taking on the Dolphins. If the Titans lose, it opens up the gap between them and the Dolphins to about 9 points, which is not something that they'd want. And then on top of that, the Tuskers need to find a way to come out in this week with 2 wins. And it was also another important week for Western Province, because they need to start winning to stop this downward trend from happening. And the Dragons on Friday night seemingly a nice prospect for Western Province to try and turn it around.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think the Dolphins are finally coming together as a side. I really do. I think that they are going to be the biggest threat right now to the Warriors' dominance in this tournament. I think the Lions, if Ryan Rickerton keeps going berserk, then obviously they have got a chance. But I do think, in terms of a team dynamic, I think the team to worry about from a Warriors perspective is undoubtedly gonna be the Dolphins for me. Their bowling lineup, Marcus Ackerman back in form. It's gonna depend as well as whether Bryce comes back. If Bryce does come back, isn't too seriously injured, that's also going to be absolutely huge for them. But yeah, for me, it's the Dolphins, the ones to watch out for.
No, I hear you. Yeah, and to a certain extent, that kind of makes a lot of sense in terms of what this week is. And yeah, we've got a full slate of games on Sunday. The games will either be on Supersport's YouTube channel, on Supersport themselves. So just watch out there and go to their websites and find out how it's going to go. Tim, we'll reach the end. Do you have any final words in terms of this week? Anybody you want to shake up so that next week we talk about them?
My boy, Jason Smith. My boy, Jason Smith, he's not had a good tournament. It's time for him to deliver for the Dolphins. Um, he hasn't needed to perform because the Dolphins have found some form at the back end of the tournament. But it'd be nice if he could get some runs at the back end of the tournament. Because there's now Bryce Parsons. There's a lot of the youngsters, Div2 Impalas, that are now
Yes.
putting the Matthew Kabritsky, putting the names that are on protein selection. It's time for Jason to say no, it's not time, not your time just yet.
Yeah, it was weird on at the Wanderers on Friday night when the Dolphins effectively demoted John Smuts after Bryce Parsons went down and they brought in Marcus Ackerman. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, I'm like, do you guys just want to rotate the strike, or do you want boundaries? And Dan Weston will tell you you want boundaries, and John Smuts is the best boundary hitter outside of Bryce Parsons in this team. And then they brought in Jason Smith, and I'm sitting there going, what's going on? He couldn't hit the ball of the square. And it was very frustrating for me watching the Dolphins. And to a certain extent, that batting lineup is filled with guys who aren't necessarily T20 technicians. And it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate this week with some must-win games, especially with Bryce Parsons out. Because take Bryce Parsons out, there's not much from there. From a runs perspective this season, Marcus Ackerman's done really well, but is Marcus really a T20 player? He can play in this format and he can do well at times, but he's not necessarily giving you consistency. And the other thing for me is Othniel Bartman. I want to talk about it in the whole Lazard discussion. And one of the reasons why maybe Othniel Bartman wasn't selected is that from a consistency perspective, especially at this domestic level across the formats, he has been hot and cold. He has gone hot and cold throughout. And yes, you can take a punt on a guy and say he's just going to do some 6 weeks of work with us in Delhi, and he's done really well for a month in SA20. But in this month at the CSA T20 challenge, when he's supposed to be dominating at this level, he has not been able to. Yes, I will note he did bowl pretty well on Friday night at the Wanderers. He was really, really good. Didn't take a lot of wickets, but he was really good under some tough circumstances from the Lions. Obviously, the quality of the batting is on the other end, but you need to be taking wickets against those types of top orders: the Russies, the Reeses, the Timbers, the Ryans. And I have a question around Othniel Bartman, because he might be on the plane to New York and the Caribbean, but is he at that level? Especially with his peers around him who are at the IPL. They're not having a great time there too, but you're not having a great time here too. And those are the type of things that are kind of working. Like when you're thinking about the Dolphins, you're like, this team doesn't look like a T20 side, but they're holding on. They're managing to win games. And the person who's been helping them win games is now gone. So what's going to happen now? They've won their first game, but we can't forget the collapse, 34 for 7, right? So for me, that's where I'm sitting with the Dolphins, which kind of gives the Titans a look in to a semifinal. And if the Dragons want to just sort their lives out and start playing proper cricket, they too can get into that semifinal conversation. So really, really big week in the CSA T20 challenge, Tim, for us.
Yeah, it's huge, and as I said before, it's the youngsters that have been really, really good. I mean, outside of the few the names that they always do well, the youngsters have done well. It'll be interesting to see if they can maintain that sort of performances throughout the tournament. As the tournament gets down to the real nitty gritty, when you playing games when you absolutely have to win. Performances are not just nice, they are absolutely needed. That's going to be the difference between having a good 2/3 of the tournament or really making a statement when it absolutely matters.
Yeah, and the Warriors, we're watching you. You've lost the game, which is probably the perfect time for them to lose the game. Don't make it a thing. You can't make it a thing now. The last thing you want is to go on a losing streak as you enter the semifinals, even though you're going to host a home semifinal, and then you're going to meet a Dolphin side that doesn't look like they want they're a good T20 side, and then they turn you over. So just be careful about that, and keep going. But yeah, it's squeaky bum time in the CSA T20, and with that, Tim, thank you very much for joining and coming on. To everyone, please remember, follow us on X, subscribe on YouTube at One World Sports Radio, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do press the like button, and yeah, send us your comments and anything else that is nice towards us. So, like for instance, Dan Weston, Ben Compton, maybe Kent shirts in the mail. I don't know. I know, I know Tim's gonna burn his, but you can definitely send to me. Just I'll wear it on the show. I'll be a county cricket fan for a year. Yeah, I could do that. Um, that's a shameless plug from me. Outside of that, goodbye and lesale kakahiso.